Now, for all the good intentions of the Orange Book, the uptick in the adoption of security across the US and this new mindset of IT security, for all its good intent, didn't prevent the rise of the malicious hacker. And in 1986, a German hacker called Marcus Hess actually hacked into 400 military computers by accessing the ARPANET. And he got in via Berkeley University's servers, reaching as deep in as the Pentagon. His intentions were not simply mischievous. He was going to sell whatever he found in there to the KGB and the Kremlin. Cyber warfare had just got real. Cyber warfare had just got real, and we needed weapons to beat the viruses. In 1987, a virus called Vienna was starting to cause major disruption to all the DOS-based computers around the world. A German programmer called Bernard Robert Fix created a program to find and destroy that virus. By 1987, cybersecurity becomes such an important theme across IT that the first truly commercial antivirus companies had started to be formed around the world. Companies like McAfee with their software Virus Scan. Avast was created in 1988, and it's still around today, a major player stopping around 1.5 billion attacks per month. By the 1990s, a true industry was born, and companies sprouted up around the world. Alan Solomon created Dr. Solomon's antivirus toolkit, and it would go head-to-head with the likes of McAfee and Symantec with its Norton antivirus products. Thank goodness the antivirus industry was born, because by the time the 1990s came along, there was mass adoption of this new platform that was taking over the world, and it was called the internet. So we had that antivirus software starting to take shape, possibly in just the nick of time. Because the other thing that was happening at this time was that viruses had started to become polymorphic. In other words, they were self-replicating and mutating so that they could avoid detection in the system in the same way that a normal virus behaves in nature. Soon, global institutions were formed, such as the European Institution for Computer Antivirus Research, that could monitor and communicate findings of new viruses very quickly to each other around the world. In the meantime, of course, viruses themselves were becoming even more sophisticated, more advanced polymorphism, mutation, and they were showing increasingly stealth-type capabilities. Companies around the world had started to erect firewalls as a first line of defense to all software entering their ecosystem. Everyone coming onto the internet around the world was, of course, a godsend to the way we shared data. But of course, it was the best thing that could have happened to also the malicious actors in the hacking community. Their world was suddenly their hunting ground. And with literally billions of consumer devices coming online, they were spoiled for choice as to where to start the hunting spree. It was like shooting fish in a barrel. The proliferation of email gave hackers a new gateway into our lives. And in 1999, a famous virus called Melissa entered the world's computers via Microsoft Word. And it would replicate itself and send itself to the first 50 email addresses which it found in your Microsoft Outlook account. And it would carry on doing that again and again on the next computer and so on. It was estimated to have cost in the region of $80 million to fix that. As web traffic grew from the year 2000 onwards, cyber criminals no longer needed to come to you. They could just hide malware and other viruses on legitimate web pages, where even the owner of the websites didn't know that the page was infected. A visitor to that website would just visit in the normal way, looking at pages and browsing around, and then some simple action would trigger the downloading of a virus onto their PC. By 2007, most of the attacks around the world were based around the zero-day exploit. Now, we're going to come across, of course, a lot of terms as we go into the course, but a zero-day attack was when the hackers found flaws in an application or an operating system which even the developers didn't realize were there. So most of the time and effort by cyber criminals around this time was to look into software that was maybe newly released, and they were just seeking out vulnerabilities. They were looking at security holes and exploiting any issues or weaknesses that they found immediately. They would do as much damage as possible before the developers even got a chance to realize the flaw. It was called a zero-day because the developers literally had 0 days notice to look into the problem and to fix it before the damage was done. An example of a zero-day attack, quite a high-profile one, was, of course, the currency company Travelex. At the end of 2019, that currency exchange system found itself the victim of a ransomware attack. Cyber criminals locked Travelex out of its own files and halted currency transactions across the UK. They demanded almost 5 million in exchange for the return of just 5 gigabits of stolen personal data. Actually, in this situation, the criminals made use of a vulnerability in the company's virtual private network, VPN. That vulnerability or weakness allowed access to the virtual private network without any username or password. And once in there, they could switch off multi-factor authentication, they could view logs and all the cached passwords that were there in plain text to see. The interesting thing, of course, here is that the VPN providers actually had provided a patch earlier on, but Travelex had failed to implement it and install it. By the time the 2010s had arrived, the cyber criminals stepped up their game, and the worldwide software developer community also knew that it had to construct operating systems and applications and even hardware that could not fall below a certain level of security and robustness. Even then, the security breaches did not stop, and in fact, they became even more bold and high profile. The key problem remains the same for the authorities. The people who are doing the attacking are generally hit and run merchants. If a hack fails, they disappear back into the darkness and move on to something else. There is no punishment or retribution for anyone who attempts a hack. If the hack succeeds, the rewards are tremendous. And by this time, the motivation was not necessarily financial gain anymore. Now they were state-sponsored cyber terrorists who were involved or motivated by geopolitics rather than financial gain. Edward Snowden, working for the CIA, famously leaked vast amounts of documents stolen from the National Security Agency, or the NSA. Another high-profile hack was Yahoo, which famously tried to hide the fact that over 3 billion user records were hacked, and it was subsequently fined $35 million for that breach. British Airways in September 2018, hackers here were able to access over 500,000 records from the British Airways system, and almost 200,000 of which included payment details. A large part of that hack was as a result of website users being redirected to a fraudulent website where the data was harvested. Of course, you may have heard of the Uber attack, where hackers stole personal information of over 2.7 million Uber customers. The ride-sharing company paid the attackers $100,000 in exchange for a pledge to destroy that data. Uber did not inform anyone of that breach for more than a year. And of course, in 2018, the WannaCry virus was a worldwide cyber attack, which within a day had locked up over 230,000 computers running Microsoft operating systems. The attackers were demanding ransom payment in Bitcoin to unlock those PCs. Now, for the UK public, this had a direct impact. It had infected over 70,000 devices around the NHS, our National Health Service. And it had locked up devices such as MRI scanners, blood storage refrigerators, and vital operating theatre apparatus. So this was a brutal attack. The cost to the NHS was around £92 million. And of course, not forgetting the political impact to the government for such an embarrassing hit on one of its main systems.